Hi, let's look at some of the advanced thumb rules for S3. Do please refer my previous video on S3 thumb rules. Like I mentioned, these thumb rules will help you with your certification preparation. Please subscribe to my channel for many such informative contents. Let's jump into the thumb rules. For thumb rules 1 to 53, please refer the previous video on S3 thumb rules. So consider this, you have your on-prem, okay, and you want we already know that AWS we have S3 and other tools and features, but you want to extend that to your on-premises stuff as well. So if you want to do that, use Outposts. So this is what Outpost does is it extends the AWS infrastructure and services to your on-premises, and this helps in a true hybrid experience. So what is hybrid? Like, this is hybrid. You will have some applications on premises, some on AWS. For example, you have something like a reporting application. The reporting application is on AWS. Consider this application is WBI, and the data source that WBI uses resides on premises. This is a true hybrid architecture. You have some databases here, and WBI is on AWS, supposed on some EC2 instances. So if you want to extend AWS capabilities to your on-premises, use this. Okay. So suppose you have a lot of files on S3 and it is difficult to remember those files, file names, etc. So can I create some sort of groups and tag them? Yes, I can. I can create S3 object tags, and I can also create, update and delete these tags at any time during the lifetime of the object. So now, why do I use tags? For example, cost. You want to save cost or monitor what is the cost utilization. So you can use tags. What tags will do is, like for example, you know that your any object on your S3 standard, there are different storage classes. So S3 standard is the expensive one. If you have objects there, you can create a tag for those objects so that you can monitor the billing and cost of that. But objects where which is on Glacier, which is not utilizing a lot of budget, etc., you might choose not to have tags and monitor those. It's up to you. Now let's think, if suppose you are a client, you're working for a client and you have a multiple S3 buckets. You want to know what is stored there, because so many people are storing their files and etc. So you want some sort of information of the metadata on S3. Okay, that is one use case. Or second use case is, for example, you are having a lot of files on S3 and suddenly you're like you belonged to, say, a finance department, and now your upline says you have to move these files into a different bucket under a different account. Okay, so they ask you to give a list, like how many objects you have and what sort of objects and those kind of stuff. If that is the use case, then use inventory reports. It will help you pull the metadata. Simply said, whatever is there in the S3 bucket, it will just pull that report and say that these are the files, and I'll show you what else it will give you. So you see this, it will give you the bucket name, key name, version ID, latest size, last modified date, tags, and so on. Now think about a question, and this comes in the certification exams a lot. So whatever I'm teaching is purely from a certification standpoint. I've seen similar questions. In the latest times, this question comes in AWS Solution Architect as well as in the Cloud Practitioner exam. Okay, what is the question is, it is linked to something like you have a wide range of objects in S3 and you have to do a batch tagging, like tagging of n number of objects. So what will you do? You will have to do it manually, or if you are looking for an automation, that's where batch operations becomes handy. I have seen questions linked with this in the recent times. What is the main use is it will, whatever it does in batch. If you want to tag hundreds of files with the e tag, it will do it. If you want to copy hundreds of files or objects from one bucket to the other, it will help you do that. If you have seen my previous video, we were talking about how you can prevent accidental deletes from S3 buckets. We discussed two things. One was, the second option is that you can also do CRR, that is cross-region replication. But you also have something called object lock. You can lock the object so that nobody can accidentally delete it. Now there are certain files, for example RBI has a regulation, and there are certain files that the banks have to maintain it. So if that is the case, we can very well apply locks, S3 object lock on those files so that nobody can overwrite or delete that data. Now what if we want to monitor S3, if everything is working fine or not? What we can do, we can use CloudWatch. So this is our next thumb rule. Use CloudWatch. What it does is it keeps monitoring the metrics for that S3 bucket wherever you have configured. You have a whole documentation on CloudWatch. You can have a read, but at a very high level, we use CloudWatch to monitor AWS resources. It can be S3, it can be EC2 instance, and so on. So the next thumb rule is always use lifecycle management. Okay, it is very important to use lifecycle management if you want to save your costs, and it brings in a bit of automation. For example, you set a set of rule that in S3 standard, okay, I have a file, and after 30 days I want to transition it over to S3 standard IA, and then later on I want to move it to say one zone IA and then to the glacier layers. I can create these policies. Okay, so the thumb rule suggests that create these policies. Don't have your data which is not being used frequently on S3 standard storage class for a year when you're hardly using it frequently. Okay, if you're not using it frequently, move it. And manually, if you try to move it, you would not be able to do it because you might forget certain things. So automate it using lifecycle management. There is no extra cost to apply lifecycle policies. And when we are talking about such automation where you want to save costs using the right storage class, in that case storage lens is useful. I have seen a question on storage lens recently. Okay, and what you need to remember is just what it does. You can get this question in AWS uh, Cloud Practitioner exam. So what is the difference between cloud metrics and storage lens? Storage lens will, it will view this object storage usage, activity trends, and so on. Cloud metrics has a different purpose. There are different set of defined KPIs that you can monitor. It can be storage, it can be memory usage, CPU usage, and so on, depending upon the resources. So whenever you are designing certain stuff like this, three stuff you should ask yourself these three questions. If you are appearing for AWS Solution Architect Associate or AWS Solution Architect Professional, you would be, able to answer a lot of questions if you ask yourself these three questions. First is, how rapidly is my overall byte count and request count increasing over time? Now we all know that AWS S3 service is scalable. There is no limit. Virtually there is no limit. But what you have to do is you want to understand what is the scale up, like what is the rate of scale up. For example, when you are playing cricket and you see India has to score these many balls and these many runs, that's the run rate. So that is what we are telling. Identify the run rate with which your files are increasing in size and the run rate of the number of requests coming to these files to view these files, either through AWS management consoles or through get API commands? Ask yourself this question. Monitor this to understand if these are genuine or people are just not using the infrastructure efficiently. Okay, the second thing which is important is it possible to save money by retaining fewer non-current versions? What it means is, if you have a versioning feature in S3, if you do that, it will maintain all the past versions. Would you want to maintain so many versions and keep your S3 storage full? Do you want to do that? Are you gaining something out of it? If not, then do not maintain so many versions. Use versioning sparingly, only for the files or objects which makes sense. Do that due diligence. And the last but not the least, have you protected your storage from accidental or intentional deletes? We all work in IT industry where you might find some people who are really selfish. The moment they are moving out of the project or they are moving out of the company, there are chances that they might intentionally delete some of the important information. I have faced it. Even now I have faced it. Some of the team members, earlier team members, they have done it. Okay, so forget about trusting people. Do not trust people. Build a system which can be trusted. Do not trust people, because people can surprise you anytime. So we discussed about different mechanism to prevent accidental deletes. This is a favorite question of AWS certification. Some way or the other they will ask this question. Now, consider a real life environment. You are working for Infosys. You are serving a customer like Bank of America. Consider this, okay? Now, what happens is the Bank of America has few AWS buckets, okay, and they are not. You are not sure. Bank of America comes to you and say, "Hey, Infosys, can you do some trick to help me save the storage cost? Am I using the storage class appropriately?" This is a question Bank of America tells Infosys. So what should Infosys say is, yes, I can help you. I'll use storage class analysis. I'll use this. Okay, what storage class analysis does is it will scan through your entire S3 bucket, and then it will tell you whether you are making use of the storage class appropriately. For example, if it finds that there is an infrequent access pattern for a certain set of files and you have still kept it on S3 standard. S3 standard is way expensive than other storage classes. In that case, it will tell you, boss, do not keep these infrequently accessed files on S3 standard. Please move it to S3 IA at least. So this is how you can save money, and Infosys can use this, make those recommendations, and tell Bank of America, hey guys, these are the recommendations. I'm going to set up lifecycle policies. I'm not going to do it manually. Remember, you will not be putting like 10 developers to move these files. No, that's not the right way. You will automate it. How you will automate it is you will use, please remember this, you will be setting the lifecycle policies so that that automatic transition happens. As a mechanism for best practice, even when you did this, do this exercise again after 3 months, because your files, new files are constantly coming in, new objects are constantly coming in. 3 months back, if you did this exercise, you have only sorted out the files which were there at that point in time. What about the files which came new in this last 3 months? You will have to again sort them out. So make frequent use of storage class analysis, either on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, but make sure you use this to benefit. And in the exam, AWS Solution Architect Associate, you will get this question. In the recent times, we have seen this question. Can I fire simple SQL queries on my S3 buckets? Can I? Yes, you can, and this is what the thumb rule says. There is something called query in place, which you can use for sophisticated query running against the data stored in S3. And when we are talking about firing SQL queries, S3 select is something which you should use to fire simple query expressions without having to retrieve the entire object. When you're trying to get, okay, this is also one of the best practices. Hear it carefully. If you have, for example, a 5 GB file, okay, and you are very clear that the data that you're looking for is in probably the first 1 GB. Do not fire a get for the entire 5 GB. Fire a get only for the first portion. Okay, that way you will be saving on the costs. That is one thing. Similarly, here what you're saying is when you're firing simple SQL expressions, it will fire it without having to retrieve the entire object. It will retrieve only the stuff that you are interested in this query. And since we are talking about SQL queries and data access, it is also done through Athena, okay, and it is also done through Redshift Spectrum. What is the main benefit of Redshift Spectrum? Suppose you have S3 and you have a Redshift database. Now you have a lot of data massaged, moved through the ETL programs, say AWS Glue or Informatica or Ab Initio or DataStitch, whatever ETL you have used. Your data is there in Redshift. Now, what if halfway down the line, when you are trying to create a report built on Tableau, realize that, hey, I forgot to bring some of the key customer insight data. Would you run through the entire exercise of the ETL to get the same data landed here? No, you don't have to do that. Use Redshift Spectrum. That data is in your S3 bucket in files. Redshift Spectrum shows that file data as an external table to Redshift. So what happens is you can make mistakes. You are allowed to make mistakes. You will not be penalized to make mistakes because we have something called Redshift Spectrum to make it look like a table, like an external table, and the file can be used as it is. You don't have to plug an ETL routine and do a lot of massaging and so on. No, you can directly plug it using Redshift Spectrum and use it. So consider an example. You have an S3 bucket, okay, and that's where all the source files land, and then you have various IT teams. One team is focusing on customer access, for example. One team is focusing on finance. One team is focusing on sales and marketing. One team is focusing on billing and so on. But these files are required by all of those, and they all have their own S3 buckets. So what you have to do is they would not want to go to your S3 bucket and source it and multiple people connect to that file. They want to make a copy of that file in their own S3 buckets. If that's required, you should use S3 replication if that is the use case you have. What it will do is it will replicate those files into all other buckets wherever it is required. So again, this is automation. Do not wait for a guy in Hyderabad to move those files into these different buckets for you. Do not wait for an Indian to do it. Okay, create S3 replication routines and automate it. Use the bots to do it. And since we are talking about replication, we cannot miss CRR, that is cross-region replication. What it means is you have data centers in Bombay, you want to replicate that data to London and vice versa. Why? If a terrorist attack or a natural calamity happens, or for some reasons there is a technical problem with the networks and entire Bombay loses the network or loses the electricity, no problem. Your application is a global application. People cannot afford a downtime because you will lose business during that downtime. So maintain a cross-replicated data set in London or in some other region, maybe in the US or some other region, so that globally users in other places would be able to access your application, and you would not miss out on revenues because of the downtime. And since we are talking about replication, obviously you will have features to do it in batches. That means bulk replication. The entire AWS S3 bucket, whatever has come here, you want to replicate it to the London AWS availability zones or regions. You can do that. Now there is a feature called replication time control. Imagine, okay, that is a requirement which says that from a disaster standpoint, if you are maintaining a data set in Bombay region or in say western region of India, so that data should be replicated in another region and it should be done under a minute. Because if you read disaster recovery solutions, two things are very important. Two things. One is RPO, the other is RTO, recovery point objective, recovery time objective. So that means anytime these two regions cannot be out of sync for more than a minute. For more than a minute, it cannot be out of sync. If you have such features to be implemented, use replication time control to predict the replication performance, and that will help you to meet the compliance or the business requirements. Suppose you have a global application, a beautiful global application. What is a global application? That means that S3 bucket objects, it is stored in a region in London, it is stored in a region in Ohio, it is stored in a region in Frankfurt. So what happens is the people in Germany, when the end users in Germany try to access that file, there they will access that request will get diverted to Frankfurt region. It will not get diverted to London or Ohio region. Similarly, if an American citizen or an American sitting in America is trying to access this application or this S3 file or object, the request will go to Ohio data centers and not to London or Frankfurt data centers. That is how multi-region access points are set up. As a best practice, if you are an architect, this is a very important topic. You will get questions on AWS Solution Architect as well as AWS Solution Architect Associate and Professional. This is a good architecture principle. Always provision for such kind of dynamic routing so that your end users do not experience latency. It depends upon the business you are in. Can you afford latency? For example, you are Uber or you are a Lyft. Lyft is an app similar to Uber. It operates in US. So if you are booking a cab in Uber and if I give you a response of 1 minute, if Uber gives you a response of 1 minute, is it okay? No, it's not okay, boss. You want immediate response. Otherwise, you would shift to maybe Ola cabs or Lyft and so on. So if you have such kind of requirements, do not, if a guy in India is booking Uber, do not send his request to a data center in Ohio. Send his request to data centers in the AWS region, which is in India. Okay, that's a point I'm making. Now you have to be very cautious about this because AWS certification exams will quiz you around multi-region access points and CRR, that is cross-region replication. Both are different things. Multi-region access points just ensures that your routing to the S3 buckets happens near to the data centers which are near to you. Whereas CRR, replication, is a disaster recovery solution to ensure that a replication is happening across a different region just in case the primary data center, the primary region goes down. Okay, these are two different functionalities and your concepts should be very clear on this because the certification exam will quiz you around this. My friends, this brings us to the end of this topic on advanced S3 concepts. These are certification essentials which will help you clear AWS Solution Architect Associate, AWS Solution Architect Professional Certification exams. Please subscribe to my channel for more such informative contents. See you in the next part. Always remember, along with this video, do not forget to visit other thumb rules which are on S3 standard topics and easy to instance. There is a whole playlist with AWS thumb rules. I'm going to publish many more such contents which will help you clear the certification. See you in the next part.